And we're live, Gloria.
Hello, everyone. Hi there. I'm Gloria Felt. I'm co-founder and president of Take the Lead. I want to welcome you to our very special Women's History Month edition of our virtual happy hour. And I'm thrilled that we have with us tonight Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum, cardiologist and director of Women's Heart Health at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City. She's an amazing woman, and I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. And if you want to know the connection between women's heart health and Women's History Month, there's a lot to talk about in terms of how women's health hasn't always been historically given first, it hasn't actually been treated as a separate and important issue, and some of the issues that are special to women have not always been really taken care of, and particularly that's true in the area of heart health. So Dr. Steinbaum will talk to us about that and tell us some insights on why we need to take care of our health and why we need to take care of ourselves first. And I'll tell you, for women, that is the hardest thing in the world. We have been so socialized to take care of other people first, and other people expecting us to take care of them first. So we will get into all of that. Now, you may wonder, what does this have to do with women in leadership? What does heart health have to do with women in leadership? And our mission at Take the Lead of gender parity for women by 2025. Well, you know, ladies, we can't be leaders. We can't be effective leaders. We can't do our work if we're not taking care of ourselves, and our hearts are a very, very important part of that. As leaders, we have to bring our whole selves to work, and that means we have to learn to take care of ourselves and take care of ourselves first and foremost. So I invite you all to go to Take the Lead's website, taketheleadwomen.com, and check out all kinds of things all kinds of programs that we have for you. And we'd love to have you come talk with us on social media and join us at our events, our workshops, and all of the things that we do to get women to leadership parity, and in so many different ways. So let me just start by introducing you to Dr. Steinbaum. And I do want you to remember that when you have registered for this virtual happy hour, that you are automatically entered to win something just invaluable. You know what it is? Well, some lucky person is going to win a Google Hangout mentoring session with me. So I hope you think that's valuable. I kind of get a laugh out of it every month, but I've had some wonderful conversations with people, and I really enjoy those opportunities to talk with folks who participate in our virtual happy hours and who are supporters and friends of Take the Lead. So we'll announce the winner at the end of the program, so stay tuned. And I do want to also tell you that we're going to be taking questions, and I've already got just a whole bunch of questions here waiting for you, Suzanne. But I do want to tell people that you can start sending your questions in now if you haven't already done so. We love to know who you are and where you're tuning in from, and so here's how you do it. Under the live web chat on your computer screen, there is a box, and you go to the box, you put your name and location for the Q&A that you find right under the video stream, and you first select the little pencil icon and type in your name and your location, and then you click on OK, and you can type in your question that way. Now, if you would prefer to tweet us instead, that's perfectly fine. We are watching our Twitter feed, and we'll pick up your questions there. If you want to tweet us, we'd love for you to use the hashtag 25 not 95. In other words, we're going to reach leadership parity by 2025, not 2095, as the World Economic Forum says we are. And our Twitter handles are @TakeLeadWomen, @TakeLeadWomen, @Gloria Felt, that's me, Gloria F-E-L-D-T, and @Dr. Steinbaum. So you can tweet any of us, and we'll try to keep tabs and answer your questions. And remember that you can always stay connected with Take the Lead through Twitter, through LinkedIn, through Facebook, through Instagram. we're everywhere. We're everywhere, and we want to stay connected with you. So here we go with our virtual happy hour. Grab your favorite cocktail or mocktail, a glass of wine, a cup of tea, whatever you like best, and let's start the conversation. I guess actually, perhaps since we're talking about heart health tonight, I should say get your glass of red wine because we definitely want to be heart healthy here. And let me first introduce our very special guest, Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum. As I said, she's attending cardiologist and the director of women's heart health at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York. And she has devoted her career to the treatment of heart disease through early detection, particularly early detection, education, and prevention. And I'm a big believer in education and prevention myself. So that's one of the reasons I particularly resonate with her. She's the author of Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum's Heart Books, Every Woman's Guide to a Heart Healthy Life. And she teaches all women how to lead the healthiest lives by living a heart-centered life. So we're going to talk about all of that. Suzanne, we are so pleased to have you. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I'm really happy to be here.
Great, wonderful. I would like to just start with something general before we get into the specific health issues.
Yeah.
How did you get to be you? Why are you doing what you're doing, and why are you so passionate about what you do?
When I started, I was that really diligent student that would write down everything my doctors, the chief doctors said. I mean, I wanted to learn everything I could. And I remember one day being in the emergency room, and I was that diligent student. I was an intern, and I was standing there with the doctors I so deeply respected, and I watched a woman 55 years old being wheeled into the emergency room. She was nauseous, sweating, vomiting. She was kind of holding her stomach and chest. She looked terrible. And they put her in the corner with the diagnosis of gastroenteritis, meaning infection, inflammation of the stomach. And what happened next was we stood there and watched her have a heart attack. It was that aha moment. We always talk about that aha moment. It was like everything stopped. There was no sound, there was lights, and it was me sitting there saying, this is so unacceptable. And I remember looking around like, does anyone else feel this way? And I felt like I was kind of the only one who was so appalled by this. It was the time when there was no such thing necessarily as women in heart disease. It was right in the beginning where we never expected to see a 55-year-old woman being wheeled in like that. And her symptoms were so atypical, and that was it. That was it. I said, I need to be a cardiologist. Yeah. But what I found out at that moment was I didn't want to be a cardiologist who treated disease. I wanted to be a cardiologist to prevent heart disease in women and to prevent that from ever happening. And I never, ever strayed from that desire, that path. And that day, it really just burned such an imprint on my mind, because that was a really long time ago, and things haven't changed quite enough as they should have.
I so can resonate. I so can resonate with how important that story is, and how important those individual reasons why we do what we do. And last year I had the pleasure and honor of speaking at an American Heart Association event, and I hadn't really thought about some of these things. The theme was, what's your why? And people were telling their stories, and I honestly hadn't really thought about the story that I had until I was prompted to do that. And I had I wasn't in a medical situation, but in my office, a young woman in her mid-40s died of a heart attack, and it was, it just incredibly traumatic. It was so, I think, unnecessary. I wish you had been there, and
I wish I was there too.
it made me so committed now to
Yeah.
try to help spread the word and try to help you spread the word and all these amazing programs that you have. Um, so, you know, when it comes to medical school, and to sort of harken back to what I was saying at the beginning about the differences in how women's and men's health has been treated and researched over the years, and particularly heart health, I think, has been, there are some really important differences between the two genders. And I'd love for you to talk about that, and talk about, if you would, historically, what difference has it made to have more women in the medical field as you have come into your own? Talk to us about those things.
Well, some of it you're going to find exciting and some of it a little discouraging, but nonetheless, I will share. It's so interesting to me because I think when we think of science and medicine, we sort of segregate it from life. And what I've tried to do in my career is put it part of life. And it wasn't until 1984 that more women were dying of heart disease than men. Guess what happened in 1984? I'm sure you know this. In 1984, that's when women equaled men in the workforce. It was that year. And so I always joke around and I say, well, we asked for it, we got it. You know, we got we got what we wanted, and we got the man's disease too. But as I jest, part of it is that the 20 years prior to 1984, all of the research was done on men's hearts. So it takes about 20 years for the research to catch up to real time. And so in real time, we started seeing more women dying because the research prior to that was never done on women's hearts. Medications, devices, bypass surgery, stenting that can save lives during a heart attack, none of it was done on women. So in 1984, everything started to change. And as time went on, the Office of Women's Health developed, the NIH BLI started enforcing that for any research that was funded by them, 50% had to include women. But when we look at all of the research, 24%, 35% are women in those trials. And you'd think, well, you know, that must have been a long time ago. But the reality is it's still going on to this day. About a year ago, the FDA approved the release of several devices. These devices, 18% of the population studied was on women. These were life-saving devices used in bypass surgery. And so women have not really been part of the trials. That's one piece of this. The other piece of this is that women really haven't been advocates for themselves because of their own awareness. So about 50% of women are aware that heart disease is her number one killer. Minority women, African American women, Latina women who are at greatest risk. About 25 to 35% of women of this population are aware of her risk factors. So that's a little bit of what's going on historically. But you mentioned more women in the workforce, more women doctors. Has that changed anything? Well, I think it's changed everything. And what has also changed is that students, men and women, learn that women get heart disease and it's their number one killer. And that wasn't part of the curriculum when I was in medical school. So there's a sensitivity to the subject, and certainly as more women become doctors, we see a sensitivity to women in general. But I will tell you that the last time I checked, only about 18% of cardiologists were women.
Ooh.
So it's still a male-dominated field. I will also tell you, though, that when women go into the emergency room now, it is less often that they are dismissed. There was one trial that was done maybe about 10 years ago. A man and a woman, actor and actress, walked into the emergency room reading the same exact script to a doctor. The majority of those men were worked up for the diagnosis of a potential heart attack, and the majority of the women were sent home with a potential diagnosis of anxiety. I will tell you
Gender stereotypes right there. Oh my
that
God.
is that is something that still exists. I would like to believe that in having conversations like this, we can help women better communicate their needs so they get the health care that they do need. And that communicating with your doctor is probably the most critical way to change the outcomes. But there's definitely been some inroads. We've had new guidelines in 2011 that were rewritten from 2005, preventive guidelines on women and heart disease. We have stroke guidelines that were just released. We have a clinical statement on women and heart disease that just came out in February of 2016. I always talk about those guidelines as being sort of Cliff's Notes for women and heart disease, so all doctors get to read them because it's the abbreviated version of talking about heart disease and stroke and who's at risk. But what's so scary that I would like to talk about a little bit in those guidelines is that there is an increase in heart disease and heart attacks and strokes in women less than 55 years old. And this population that we otherwise think of as being so healthy and vital and vibrant, we are seeing an increase in risk factors like diabetes and obesity. Maybe it is from that juggling act of having it all. Maybe it is catching up to us. But the statistics have sort of developed with the history, and the history has been slow.
Wow. I just want to take one moment before we move into a personal story or that you told and a video that you showed at a recent event that so moved me. And I want to get to that, but I just have to take a moment, activist that I am, to say that all of those changes that you just described in the bigger policy arena around heart health, they didn't just happen. They happened because women
Oh, yeah.
organized, because health groups organized, because women spoke up, and so I think we can't underestimate the importance of public advocacy on these issues as well as individual self-advocacy.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I can tell you I've had the honor and the privilege of getting to know and working with some of these women cardiologists who were really on the ground, on the forefront of this issue. 12 years ago, Go Red for Women started, and I'm part of that. I'm a spokesperson now. I'm the co-chair in New York City, but I didn't begin this mission.
Mhm.
And I feel like I'm really the recipient and next generation to push it along. But the agenda began 12, 15 years ago when a group of women doctors said, enough is enough. And the research that's being generated is by a group of women doctors throughout this country who are really changing everything.
That is so exciting. And you are changing everything as well, everything that comes into your path. Tell us about Delilah. Tell us about Delilah. Then we want to watch. We want to see a little bit about her.
Delilah is a funny story because Delilah uh, is a part owner of telecom and answering service in New York. So when doctors are on call, and I am one of those doctors that have been on call every single day, so Delilah would call me almost every single day, and I would hear, Dr. Steinbaum, it's Delilah. And every night I'd say, hello, Delilah, how are you doing today? And this was 10 years that this went on, that Delilah and I really got to know each other. And over the summer, Delilah called me about a patient, and I kind of thought she was short of breath. And I said, Delilah, tell me about yourself. And she started telling me her story. She was a victim of domestic abuse and left her husband, raised her 3 kids on her own. She was a secretary at Telecom, and she became now a part owner. And I just said, my gosh, to me that you just sound like a superwoman. But Delilah, because I noticed she was short of breath, who takes care of you? And she started crying. And I said, "That's it. You got to come in." And I knew that Delilah worked all the time because she'd call me early in the morning. She was calling me late at night. She was always calling me. And it just occurred to me that there was nobody who had Delilah's back. And so that's the setup to what
Familiar
happened.
story. Such a familiar
Yeah.
story. So Delilah is the person who, when I need my doctor on the weekend, I would be
Yes,
calling,
you
right?
called
Yeah.
Delilah.
Okay. All right. This is Delilah. Okay. Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at this story because it is so moving. It is so touching. This is when we pray for the technology to work.
My fingers are crossed.
Yeah, good. How are we doing? I don't think so.
Everything okay?
I'm just looking to see. I don't. Oh, there it is. It's on the
There's a
screen.
video, yeah.
Yeah, I just can't hear it.
Yeah.
Let's make sure people watching can hear it.
Is a typical example of a woman who has put herself last and forgets that piece of self-care. And part of my job as being her physician is reminding her that she needs to make herself a priority. And this is for herself, for her family, for everyone that loves her. What Delilah and I talked about when we first spoke was that she really knew she needed to lose weight. What she didn't realize is that she had some medical issues that really needed to be addressed.
It means so much to me because I don't, like she said the other night, you care about other people to the point that you stop caring about yourself. And she's right. And the fact that she wants me to get healthy means everything to me.
One of the most difficult things for all of us is to find out that something's wrong. And she was no different. But the most important piece of that is that we take the steps that we need to improve our health.
10 pounds! You lost 10 pounds!
I gotta get moving. Get my butt to the gym, get some dance classes on, but I have to take the time out to do it. And not to keep saying, oh, I can't. I'm being grateful to have people to help me to get to a healthier state of life. I have 1 month before I speak, and I want to really make a difference.
March 1st is our Go Red for Women luncheon. We have about 1,300 people. And Delilah is going to be on that stage. And I'm excited for her because she's really looking forward to it. And I think that's great.
It's a great story. Really a great story, Suzanne. And having had a chance to see Delilah in person, I know that she's continued with that regimen. She's lost more weight. She's looking great. She's become an ambassador for the message, for your message, and so that's a great story. And it actually, I want to. It leads me to a question that has come in from a viewer, and it's very related. And I would like to see what your answer is to this, and maybe you can tell us a little more about how you help women like Delilah and women like all of us to lead healthier lives. This is from Tracy in New York. She says, I'm a 33-year-old mother of two with a history of heart disease on my mother's side. I'm very concerned that because of the family history, I'm at a higher risk of having heart disease. Are there things that I can do now to keep my risk of heart disease low? So how could Delilah have prevented the problems that she faced, and how can we all start taking care of ourselves when we're younger? What are the things we should do?
It's so, and I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think this is the crux of everything. Heart disease is 80 to 90% preventable. Now, I have to say that again, because as much as you have a family history, it's 80 to 90% preventable. So
That's
what does that mean? It's amazing.
It is. Mm-hmm.
It means we have to understand what our risk factors are. And what the American Heart Association has been talking about this year is getting a well woman visit to know your numbers. So what are those numbers? It's cholesterol, it's blood pressure, it's your body mass index, your weight, your height and your weight, because obesity is a risk factor, smoking is a risk factor, diabetes or the metabolic syndrome is a risk factor, sedentary lifestyle, stress, your diet, and really how you choose to live, your approach to life, which I'll get into in a second. But these recent guidelines that came out talked about what is going on in a woman's entire life. Like, does she have any history of elevated sugars or gestational diabetes, high blood pressure or preeclampsia? What was going on with the pregnancies and the deliveries? And was there any history of autoimmune diseases, inflammatory diseases like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease? Because we really understand that inflammation leads to heart disease. So it comes down to understanding exactly who you are. And knowing who you are is a really interesting process, because you have to be objective. And being objective is a little bit about data, and it's a little bit about being honest with yourself. So let me give you an example of what I mean. You can go into a doctor's office, get your blood pressure checked, get your cholesterol checked, get your sugars checked, and that's objective data. Can't deny it. It is what it is. You can get on a scale, know your weight. You can determine whether or not you need to lose some, that sort of thing. But when it comes down to things like Delilah, who said to me, I'm fine, I got it, I could take care of everyone and I could do everything, until she actually sort of fell apart a little bit, I think we have to be genuinely honest with ourselves and say, am I really okay? Because what we've really come to understand is the importance of depression, stress, hostility, anxiety, social isolation, being in negative relationships, and maybe that ties into all the other things, but how these actually affect our hearts. And so I think everyone needs to go get their objective data, especially if they have a family history, because if you do have high cholesterol or high blood pressure, you change your diet, you exercise, and sometimes you need medication, and you should do everything you can, because you don't have to get heart disease, and that's the reality. But then you have to look at the other stuff, and that is up to you.
That's these habits are hard to break, and they're hard to create new ones.
That's right.
And what I saw you doing in that video is being so supportive and helping Delilah in such a positive way to change her lifestyle. And you know, when it comes to being leaders, when it comes to Delilah's running a company, it appears, when it comes to any of the women who may be participating this evening, who may be in different kinds of leadership positions or may have the stresses of running their homes. That's certainly plenty of stress for all of us. How much of it is the stress itself, and how much of it is how we manage the stress? And what can you tell us about how to manage our stress well?
Well, I will tell everyone out there, and I wrote about this in the book, I think that everyone comes into my office and says to me, I have more stress than anyone else. Because we all feel like nobody could possibly have more than we have.
No, I do.
Not me. And I think the reason I'm telling you this is because I am telling you right now, I don't care how fabulous somebody is juggling and running a company and taking care of her kids and doing everything and working out. She's under stress because everybody has stress. But the issue comes down to how you manage it. And it's really the first thing so much about perspective. You know, is the world really, really going to come to an end? Think about it and count to 10 and then breathe. Because that is probably the biggest question you can ask yourself in those crisis moments. And the second issue is to have a real daily practice of managing your stress. And whether that's exercise, there was research on yoga, there's been tons of research on transcendental meditation, and all of these daily practices show a decrease in heart disease. I've been talking a lot about transcendental meditation, and a bit of that is because the enormous amount of responsible research that's been out there about it. In one study showing a reduction of heart disease and stroke by 48%, and a clinical statement by the American Heart Association that it should be the first way that we reduce blood pressure, because blood pressure is a manifestation of stress. So changing habits are hard. Managing stress sometimes seems impossible. So you need a toolkit, a toolbox, stuff in your back pocket that you can grab onto, like the counting to 10 or the breathing or whatever else it might be, to just figure out how to manage it, because it is hard, and it's hard for all of us. It really is.
Requires a lot of intention. So I've got a lot more questions here. I'm going to come back to you with, and people want to know all kinds of things about their heart health and how they can deal with it and manage it and prevent it and take care of themselves, just as you're suggesting. This is the point in our conversation, though, where I get to remind people that this is Take the Lead's monthly virtual happy hour, that our very special guest this week is Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum, and she's talking with us today about heart health. And we're talking about how that connects to the leadership work that Take the Lead does, because you can't really take care of other people and you can't really lead other people if you're not taking care of yourself. And so we have to remember that we are whole people and that we have to lead with a whole heart, as it were, in order to be able to really be good at the leadership roles that we want women to take and that we think women should be able to take. And actually, I actually think that the more women ascend to having equal levels of power within society, the more the stresses get equalized in a good way, and that the more in control you can actually be of your life and the choices that you can make in your life when you have that kind of flexibility. So I think that leadership and these health issues are intimately intertwined.
Can I comment on that, Gloria?
Yes.
Because there was a really interesting study that looked at job stress specifically and heart disease. And the women that suffered the most from heart disease, that were those who felt out of control in their jobs. So you're 150% correct, because the women who are actually in leadership positions did not suffer as much as the women who had no control over their lives. The second piece I want to bring up in general is that when you eat healthy and exercise, you have an exorbitant amount of energy. The more you sleep, the more you take care of yourself, the less stress you feel, because your baseline heart rate and blood pressure is so low. I can walk in a room and watch someone from a distance and know exactly how they take care of themselves just by their manners. Because I will tell you, people who are truly living from the heart, from the place of being the most heart healthy, they're pretty calm and in control. They're vibrant, they're focused, they don't react and respond. They're not as hostile. And I can't fully document this, but I sort of can document this.
Well, I'm with you. Intuitively, I think that's right. And actually, more than intuitively, I would say that from my own experience, as I attained higher leadership roles in my life, what I found was that I could peel away. I could peel away some of the stresses because I had to be looking at things from a bigger picture, and I had to stay calm in order to do that. I had to really be able to be calm, and also I reached a point after having been a total slug for the first 40 years of my life, never playing sports. I reached a point where if I have a day without exercise, I just can't do it. I can't do it. I will do anything to get my hour of exercise in every day. It makes such a huge difference in my mental state and acuity and ability to just feel calm and collected about everything that's going on. So I'll be your poster girl anytime.
Perfect.
For that theory. So here's a question from Joan in British Columbia. I have a lot of people say they don't need to exercise because they have an active and not sedentary job. How do you get people to understand being busy is different than exercise for your heart?
Ooh, good question. Exercise is by far the best medication when your heart rate is increased and sustained for a period of time. So the great news is we can give a prescription for exercise. It's not active, it's not running around, it's getting your heart rate up for 150 minutes per week. That's moderate intensity exercise. So that's about getting your heart rate up to 75% of your predicted maximum, 75 to 85. The higher your heart rate goes up, the less time you have to spend, but nowhere does it say running around and being busy equals cardiovascular activity. That's not it. So let me give you a small calculation. It's the number 220 minus your age. You multiply that number by 85%, and that is what we call your target heart rate. So if the people you're talking to get their target heart rate up, running around and being busy for 30 minutes, 5 days a week, then good for them. But short of that, it's just being active. It definitely helps, by the way, and I do want you to know that for every hour we walk, and in terms of exercise, for every hour we get up and walk around, there's a decreased incidence in obesity and diabetes. So being active is critical. The more you sit in the leisure time, sitting 1 hour a day, there is an 18% increased risk in cardiovascular disease. So that's like watching my favorite television show every night. You know, that 1 hour, it increases your risk. So really doing stuff and doing something makes a difference. And I don't want you to tell your friends that it doesn't matter. But what matters the most is getting your heart rate up, that target heart rate, to about 150 minutes a week.
So if I walk around while I'm watching my favorite TV show, does that help?
Honestly, I am obsessed with this show Empire, and I do leg lifts the entire time.
That's a great picture. That's a great picture.
There's some music. It works out.
Say, I have a question about the Fitbits and the all of these devices that people are using. They're Apple Watches, and all of these ways that people are monitoring how many steps they take in the course of a day. Do you think that's a great idea? Is that really helping people?
I can't believe you're asking me this because we never had this conversation.
I know. I just made it up.
This is breaking news, Gloria. Are you ready? I've been involved in a product in development that is a medical grade device that's actually accurate. And it really, really looks at your heart rate, your heart rhythm, how many steps, what you've done, your oxygenation, all of that. And it's coming out soon. We're just waiting for FDA approval. But I do want to tell you, in full disclosure, that I have that in the back pocket. Mm-hmm. But because of that, I was asked by Tom's Guide to actually compare all of these devices. Yes, we never talked about this. To my stress test. So on a stress test, you're hooked up to the machine. You're hooked up to an EKG. There is nothing more accurate than that. And we had this woman come in and put devices all up of her up and down her arm, the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, everything. I will tell you genuinely and honestly, if you want all the data, to look it up in Tom's Guide, but I will tell you from my perspective, most of them were relatively inaccurate, except the Apple Watch. But the funniest thing was, it wasn't exactly made for her wrist, because she was pretty small, and unless that watch was tight, 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 tight on the wrist, it would lose signal, and then she would lose the actual heart rate. So you had to get it on right, or it became inaccurate. It was really, really interesting, but that turned out to be the best one. All of these devices work if they work. And there's a lot of variables to making sure that they work, and certainly contact is one of the major variables. The one that I'm involved with goes on the chest, so there's not that issue, but we'll have to talk about it when it comes out some other time. I will have to tell you that I love these devices in general because it makes you accountable. And the more accountable you know and the more aware you are of what you're doing, I believe in this concept of empowerment. The more that we are empowered to understand what we're doing, who we are, how we're living, the more we can make changes. Back in the day, I used to tell everyone, write down what you're doing. Pen and paper. You know, it's very fancy right now, but write down what you're eating. Write down how much you're exercising. And it's the same concept. And I will tell you, over the years, people just writing down, and that's kind of how this book happened for me, people writing down what they were doing, all of a sudden, everyone started losing weight. And it was like, wow, what is the diet? And I didn't know how to explain. It's called accountability and really self-empowerment. Because if you realize that you're eating 1,000 calories after 10 o'clock at night, and that if you just went to bed a little earlier or cut out the calories, you would lose weight, that's quite powerful.
Very.
And so I recommend that for everyone, and I think the devices help with that.
That's really, really interesting. I have been wondering about that. So thank you for that answer. And I look forward to finding out about this device that you're working on. So here's a question from Corinne in Arizona. Please talk with women about atrial fibrillation. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not sure exactly what that question is, but
well, I'll explain it, but I would love to know why and what the reason. And let me tell you a little bit about atrial fibrillation. It is really, interestingly, becoming an epidemic of sorts for women over the age of 65, because as we get older, a lot of us, by the age of 60, about 50% of people will have high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is one of the greatest risk factors that leads to atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is a disconnected, irregular heartbeat of the top chamber of the heart. So instead of getting the bump, 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 what you get is a heart that is fibrillating. It's quivering, the top part of the heart. So you're not getting that strong beat, you're getting a fibrillation. And what happens when it fibrillates is the blood pools in the heart and it actually clots. When you get clotted blood in the heart, if it beats, it can go to the brain and cause a stroke. And it is one of the scariest risk factors that can lead to stroke. So what leads to atrial fibrillation? I always say, we know how to manage it, we know how to prevent it, we know how to deal with it in treatment, but let's go back. How do we not get atrial fibrillation? We have to watch our blood pressure, watch our cholesterol, watch our weight, exercise, and eat right. And I am going to sound like a broken record. All of those things prevent atrial fibrillation. If you do have atrial fibrillation, the treatment, the most important treatment, is to be on a blood thinner to prevent a stroke. I've seen research and studies that say older women are less likely to be on a blood thinner, and they are more at risk for stroke, and so they should be on a blood thinner. And rate control, getting it back into regular rhythm, is crucial, but if not, keeping the heart rate slow. I hope I answered the question because I kind of covered it in a big spectrum, but again, I go back to prevention.
Well, and in terms of the aging process, I mean, there are some things we can manage and some things we can't manage. And one thing we can't manage is we all get older at the same rate. And so hence the next question also from Bonnie in Florida. She'd like to know if menopause affects your heart health.
Yes. So I don't exactly agree that we all get older at the same rate. I think that we can really
Now, there's breaking news.
think about it, though. You have seen a 65-year-old woman who doesn't exercise, and you've seen a 65-year-old woman who does.
Mhm.
And they're two very, very different women. When you go into menopause, a couple of things happen. The cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, the LDL, tends to go up, and the HDL, the good stuff, goes down. That HDL cholesterol protects the arteries. So as we go through menopause, as the estrogen decreases in our bloodstream, and as that happens, the LDL goes up and the protective HDL goes down, so it puts us at greater risk for heart disease. The other thing that happens is the arteries that usually dilate when we exercise and constrict when we need them to, they're very dispensable and pliable, so they don't rip and tear to develop plaques. With menopause, they tend to get more stiff. And so guess what we can do to prevent those arteries from getting stiff? Exercise, exercise, exercise. Preventing stress, eating healthy, not smoking. So menopause, are you ready? This is what I say about menopause. Train for menopause like you're training for a marathon. Because if you go through menopause, exercising, eating right, sleeping, watching your stress, it's going to keep those arteries healthy. And guess what happens when your arteries stay healthy? You don't get hot flashes, you don't get sleep disturbances, you don't get as many mood swings, but you don't feel as badly as if your arteries are stiff. Because what happens with hot flashes and all those other things is partially because of the fluctuations.
Well, I was just going to ask you for a laundry list of tips, and I think you just gave them.
Yeah.
That was a great. I hope everybody was taking notes. That was Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum's recipe for a healthy heart. That was great. I have another question for you from Cheryl in California, and this is kind of a long question. Many women leading their normal busy lives are now also training and competing in high-demand endurance sports, like triathlons, and I actually see this on my Facebook page with many of my friends are doing this, so this is ringing true for me. Not only to be fit, but also to fit in with company culture, where there's a lot of competition. That's kind of interesting. My experience is that they will feel great for several years, eat a more calorie and nutrient restrictive diet thinking it's healthy, have inadequate recovery, and then crash with scary heart issues later on, and as well as injuries. That's a whole other thing. Can you speak to the nutrition needs of active women who want to maintain healthy hearts?
Wow, you have the best viewership here because everyone's asking the most amazing questions. I love this. First of all, I didn't realize that women were doing this to fit into the culture at work, and that's making a whole lot of sense. The good news is that I find that women who do this, when women have goals, when anybody has goals, they tend to stick to the program. So if you have a goal, I'm going to do this for the triathlon in 3 months, you're more likely to exercise every day, eat right, and all those other things. But what you're talking about is such a critical issue, this nutrition issue, which I'm obsessed about because we have gotten a lot of really scary information out there. So there's information about things like the paleo diet or just eating protein when you're training and the need for that, and the culture behind it is really not talking specifically to women who are pushing their bodies to the extreme. I want everyone to understand the need and necessity for complex carbohydrates in life, that they are not bad. Bread is not bad for you. I am so sorry. Pasta is not bad for you. These things are not bad for you, but they are critically important for women who are training. You need carbohydrates for your cellular energy, for your brain energy. And I see a lot of women say, I'm just going to eat protein, low carbs, no carbs. I'm going to live on beans and vegetables. And it's not sustainable, and they do end up sick. And the other piece is you've got to be so conscious about the water you're drinking. Dehydration is critical. I see women come to me with irregular heartbeats, whether it's atrial fibrillation, something called premature ventricular contractions. I see a lot of different issues that happen because of this overtraining and non-sustaining. And that sustaining piece is essential. And I hope I answered that to your satisfaction, because it's a great question and a necessary one.
A very interesting one that combines, again, the physical with the cultural issues that we're all dealing with, and particularly as more women move into leadership. Want to take just a quick minute to, and I'm going to come back to do a wrap up, and we're going to get some really great tips and tools from you, and tell people how they can find you and your book and all of those kinds of things. I do want to let people know that next month our topic is going to be about the importance of nonprofits and how philanthropy is changing the world. So we cover all the bases here. We cover all the bases. Our special guest next month will be Nancy Lublin. You may recall, if you're familiar with her name, that when she was 24, she started her first nonprofit, and that was Dress for Success, which has now become a big national program. And she has not stopped since then. She's every few years she starts a new nonprofit. She's a serial entrepreneur in the nonprofit world, I guess you would say. So we're looking forward to a very interesting conversation with Nancy Lublin next month in our virtual happy hour. So you can go to our website now, taketheleadwomen.com, and you can go ahead and sign up. And we look forward to that. And, you know, I just noticed, actually, everybody's got to attend that because it's on April 13th, which is my birthday. So I expect everyone, all my friends, if I'm going to be doing a virtual happy hour at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on April 13th, I have to have all my friends there celebrating my birthday with me. So hop on over to taketheleadwomen.com, sign up for that, and while you're there, take a look at all the other fabulous things we have to offer you. If you're not already signed up for our newsletter, our weekly newsletter, Take the Lead This Week, you want it, you need it. It's a 5-minute read, and you stay totally up to date on what's going on with women and leadership and women in the world in general. So that's my unpaid political announcement here for the moment. So to come back to Suzanne, there's one last question here from a viewer, Natalie in New York, and I think it may bear a relationship to the last question you answered. If you could just quickly say what your thoughts are on the importance or not of taking vitamin supplements to supplement your diet.
Another great question. I think that there was really a perception for a while that the more was better, more supplements, more vitamins, the better. We know that's not the case. In fact, there's been multiple trials to show that vitamin supplementation is not beneficial. I will tell you this, that many women who we just talked about, who are burning the candle at all ends, who are not having a great diet and sustaining what they need to. Iron deficiency is something that might be an issue. You can check that in a blood test whether iron supplementation is necessary. Vitamin D is something that many of us are deficient in and can lead to multiple medical issues. We don't go out in the sun without sunscreen anymore, right? And we shouldn't, right? But because of that, and for multiple different reasons, we see a lot of women have a decrease in low levels of vitamin D. Again, it's a blood test. You can get that checked. The other supplementations I do recommend, and the FDA recommends, omega-3 fatty acids that we can really get in foods like fish, fatty fish. Many times we don't eat enough of that fish, and omega-3s are so important that it is actually a supplement that I do recommend. Potentially a B complex, but again, this is a blood test that you can take. I don't eat meat, so I do take a B complex. If you're a vegetarian, I would recommend it. And depending on your diet, there are supplements that you need to take, again, if you're a vegetarian. But in general, omega-3s and potentially vitamin D and potentially a B complex and potentially iron.
So each person is really different, and you need to get know your numbers.
Know your numbers.
Get your numbers checked, and then you will have a better idea of what you should do.
Yes.
Well, this hour has just flown by, and I want to give you a few minutes to wrap up and talk about your risk factor checklist, which people can download from the link right here on this page on our website where they've been watching us now. So say a little bit about that, please. What are they going to get?
So as I mentioned when we first started this conversation, women's risk factors are not just the basics, blood pressure, cholesterol, and sugars. It's really about whether or not you have an inflammatory disease, if you've had any issues with pregnancy. So this risk factor list is specific for women. When you hear all these guidelines out there about new cholesterol guidelines and new blood pressure guidelines, it's not specific to women, and this risk factor list is just all about us.
And where can people find you and your book?
Well, I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram. It's Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum on Facebook or Dr. Steinbaum on Twitter. I have a website, which is srsheart.com. And my book could be found on Amazon. It's Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum's Heart Book, Every Woman's Guide to a Heart Healthy Life.
Fantastic. Well, I highly recommend it, and to make it really easy for people, we've also got a link to your book on our webpage as well, so people can just click right now and order it if they would like to. Before we go to the lucky winner of the prize for the evening, the monthly giveaway of an hour of mentoring via Google Hangout with me, tell us your go-to quote or song that keeps you going and gets you powered up when you need to be powered up.
So, as I also mentioned in the beginning of my career, I was in the minority. And I really, against everybody's thoughts, got up in front of a group of guys who all they really cared about is surgery and stenting and all these heart attacks to talk about things like women's heart, exercise, and nutrition. And I would say to myself every single time, the greatest love of all, but specifically, if I should fail, if I succeed, at least I lived as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity. And I wish for everyone to feel that way every day and to be able to have something in their life that they're passionate about, because living life with passion and purpose, believe it or not, is the most heart healthy thing you can do.
I totally believe that. Thank you. That is beautiful. I think we will, not that we should, we will, if we can get that from you, we will post that on our website as well, because it's such a great poem, such a great piece of advice for people, a mantra for people to have. So the lucky winner of our monthly virtual happy hour giveaway is Kashana Murphy, who lives in Louisiana. So you see, we have people from all over the country.
That's great.
So thrilled. So Kashana, I can't wait to talk to you, and we'll talk all about taking the lead and whatever you have on your mind. So you can expect an email from us this week, and we'll get it set up and scheduled, and looking forward to that very, very, very much. A huge thank you to Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum for being with us today. And thank you to everyone for joining. I hope to see you next month with Nancy Lublin when we'll talk about how philanthropy has changed and can change the world for the better, and how nonprofits can do that. In particular, be sure to go to taketheleadwomen.com and contact us anytime you are looking for a fabulous keynote or a workshop for your group or your company that will help women reach our goal and our mission of leadership parity by 2025, and connect with us on all social media every day. So till next month, thank you for being with us, and power to you.